with the way things have been, I'm sure that you by now have seen that now, I guess, kind of meme legend clip from the show The Newsroom, wherein the character Will McAvoy, played by Jeff Daniels, kind of calls out these like he's on a panel and he's saying like freedom and freedom and like but the kind of thesis of it is that America is not the greatest country in the world anymore. And he makes a lot of claims in that clip that have been debunked. The main one that I want to take issue with today is that, talking to the questioner, which she asks honestly a stupid question. It is a pretty common, like, what do you want to say, like political stump question. Why is America the greatest country in the world? And I mean, that's a silly question. You ask a silly question, you're going to get a silly answer. But he tells her that she is without a doubt the worst generation period, ever period. And my question in regards to that is, so like she's a millennial, undoubtedly. She looked like she was mid-20s, maybe early 30s at the most. And so millennial, like, people are constantly saying that millennials are the worst. Now people are saying like Gen Z is the worst generation that has ever existed. And so I would just as like cross-examination maybe. So you're saying that millennials who would rather work at like as a barista than as like an auditor, per se, are the worst generation ever, compared to, let's say, just in the last few, like J. Edgar's FBI, the Red Scare people, or 80s Satanic Panic people, like burning heavy metal records because they were afraid that they were backwards masked. Worse than them? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, at least that generation wasn't eating Tide Pods, right? Which is Gen Z, not millennials. But, what about, I mean, worse than 1930s fascist Germany? We're worse than those people? Or we're worse than Jim Crow South 1960s? We're worse, we as a generation are worse than those people were. Or 1860s, 1850s, slavery, like cessationist Democrats, we're worse than those people. We're worse than the transatlantic slave trade, like literal, I mean, stealing people from other countries and bringing them over here to the New World, South America, Central America. We're worse than those people. We're worse than the Spanish conquistadors that brought disease and famine and death and destruction to the like Central South America. We're worse than those people. Or we're worse than the Mongols. We're worse than the Huns sacking Rome. Or we're worse than the people who burned the temple or the library in Alexandria. See, suffice it to say that that is the most boomer speech that has ever been given, possibly. That you have an older man who has no respect for younger individuals, which no one ever does, saying things about the country which are almost patently false. The idea that previous generations fought wars only over moral reasons. I mean, you know, like the whole, like blowing up the USS Maine and blaming it on Spain so that we can invade Cuba, or putting missiles into Turkey and trying to provoke Russia, and then claiming that we're the victim when Russia tries to put missiles in Cuba. That literally, just all the things that we have done, right? 600,000 people in the dead in the Civil War over whether or not slaves are human beings or not. Like, we, like, just, it's so short-sighted, and it's so much of, like, the good old days speech, which is almost patently false. It's very rose-colored glasses, but honestly, you see this like, well, because people have the ability to share their thoughts on the fly on social media, that they're inherently less efficient or they're less lazy. Listen, the thing is, labor-saving devices like washing machines and dishwashers and whatever, computers, have made it so that I, as a millennial, am able to do more work in less time than at any previous generation, which means that I have a lot of free time, and so I binge watch Netflix and I make crappy YouTube videos and whatever. Like, just because of the fact that I don't have to work as hard as as previous generations did in order to make the same kind of income, does not inherently make me more lazy. What it actually makes me is it gives me opportunities. Gary Vee is one of these. So, like, I have options, I have free time, I can do I can have more capital, both financially and through time, in order to do kind of whatever I want, make whatever I want to have happen. And I think that this really shows a level of jealousy, maybe, that older generations have for younger people, that, like, I've even heard several say of, like, I wish I would have had the free time that you have now, because I would have done this and that and some other things. I wish I would have had the financial resources that you have now, because I would have gone on these vacations and I would have done all these other things. And instead of celebrating that together, we have allowed that thing to divide us instead. We have allowed that of, like, instead of older people being like, you know what, you have all this extra free time, listen, let me help you steward that better. These older people are, like, just shaming them for it instead. And younger people, instead of looking for wisdom on how to use that time and freedom in an opportune and kind of an executive way, we're just kind of like, well, I'll just watch some Netflix. I'll go through The Office again, or I'll start over with The Simpsons, or I'll do something like that. We are prone to wasting it, but of course, every generation has always been prone to waste rather than really capitalizing on the things that we have. Whether that's wasting peace or wasting like, just whatever. Like, we're really, it's a human condition, not necessarily a generational condition. So got way deeper into this than anyone wants or cares about, but simply, I'm so tired of older generations shaming younger people for no other reason than this, like, good old days, like, almost like glass half full view of the past that does not in any way really reflect how things were. And then getting upset with younger people for being discontent with the way things are, even though the previous generations clearly either didn't want to or chose not to change things that clearly need to be changed. That's why you're seeing people, like, storming the streets and stuff. Like, and then I'm most frustrated with people my age, millennials, using clips like that, which are not shaming boomers, the ones that they're actually mad at. They're shaming each other with it in a way to try and take a moral high ground they just simply do not have over, I don't know, race relations or religious freedom or whatever else that they want to try and cut and paste into that monologue.